Hello and welcome. We've got a great topic for you today, and we appreciate everyone making the time to join us. I'm Zach Lehmacher. I'm here in Seattle and lead Agile's Privileged Access Management practice, and I'll be moderating this topic with three of our lead PAM architects from across the country. Our agenda is pretty basic today. First, we're going to do some quick introductions and then jump straight into the panel discussion. After the panel discussion, we're going to dig in deeper to some specific content about the access patterns your privileged administrators use so that we can get to the real heart and understanding of how you assess and quantify the security posture of those patterns. We're hopeful that these topics can really help you make and justify decisions about your path forward with specific PAM functionality, especially now that so many of your administrators have gone fully remote for the time being. Before we dive into the topic at hand, if you aren't already familiar, I want to take a quick couple minutes to introduce Agile, our PAM practice, and then most importantly, introduce you to our expert panelists. At Agile, we are a strategy-first risk and security advisory and services firm. We were established in 2001 in the Bay Area and are backed by a $3 billion private equity fund. Agile has a national practice of deep specialists focusing on establishing and maintaining long-term client relationships by helping our clients be successful. Our specialists are mostly senior people with more than 10 years of experience on average, spread across our three high-level service offerings, those being risk and compliance, information protection, and security, and all things identity and access management. Which brings us to the folks you'll be talking to today. So Agile's dedicated privileged access management practice operates as part of our world-class IAM practice. Our business empowered approach ensures that we work on your highest risk and highest impact items first, harmonize regulations and framework requirements, and establish KPIs that properly represent your success. So we are fortunate to have the highest level of PAM architects and engineers and experts that exist in this space, including certifications up to the Guardian level in CyberArk, which is not a common one. Although we are a strategy-first organization, once strategy is established, nobody is better at implementing, securing, managing, and maximizing the leading PAM software platforms than we are. Also of keynote, as it's necessary in privileged security, our panelists are also experts in the systems that PAM sets off to secure, because we believe that when you take a holistic approach to the privilege problem, controls are accomplished in many, many systems and applications well beyond the PAM software platforms. Okay, that's a little bit about the practice in our firm. Let's meet our panelists. So Yamana, do you mind giving us not only a quick introduction, but also sharing a fun fact about yourself?
Sure, Zach. Thanks for the briefing. So hello, everyone. I'm Yamuna Vasudevan. I'm a senior architect and a PAM SME in Agile. I'm passionate about security and have been trying my hands in different areas of information security for about 16 years now. Starting off as a PKI developer, I got into consulting, auditing, and architecting security solutions. And for about past 10 years, I've been focusing more on providing solutions to clients with privileged access management issues. And well, Zach, a fun fact about me. So when I was a kid, I did a karate maneuver wrong and broke my little finger while breaking the brick. And since then, I couldn't even watch those maneuvers in movies because it just gives me the creeps.
Nice. That's a good one. Thanks a lot, Yamuna. Rick?
Thanks, Zach, and hello to everyone on the call. My name is Rick Hubbard, and I live in Olathe, Kansas, which is a southwest suburb of Kansas City. It's not far from the geographic center of the continental US. So I started my IT career as a help desk analyst and moved my way up to the security role about 14 years ago as an Active Directory administrator. My first lead assignment was with a new product we were deploying called CyberArk Enterprise Password Vault. And at the time, it was just kind of viewed as a fancy replacement for our very secure password protected Excel spreadsheet, but we realized it had much more potential, and I've been working with it ever since. Interesting fact about me, I recently started a new hobby of flying drones. I just purchased my first one, and I've only crashed it about 12 times. And I've always been able to retrieve it, and there's been no injuries or broken parts. So I think that's a good start.
Nice. Well, I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad average as not being a drone expert, but that sounds pretty scary. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Rishi, you mind introducing yourself?
Yep, thanks, Zach. Hello, everyone. This is Rishi. I'm based out of Northern Virginia. I'm working in the field of information security for past almost 20 years, and out of which I have been working on the privileged access management exclusively for past 10 years, and I have used various tools to implement the privileged access management in various domains, and then building the PAM program. I have been using and working with CyberArk for past couple of years, which is the top-notch industry leader in the privileged access management. I'm CyberArk Guardian certified and have done more than 25 plus engagements using CyberArk. The fun fact about me is when I'm not working, then either I'm cooking or training dogs. I just love to train dogs. So if you got one, send him over to me. Over to you, Zach.
Nice. I actually didn't know that. We're a stray dog house ourselves, so we'll have to trade some notes on that. So thanks.
Oh, yeah,
thanks.
absolutely.
Okay, cool. So as I mentioned, I'm Zach Lehmacher, so I'm a managing director and leader in Agile's PAM practice here in Seattle. I've been in information security for around 20 years or so, entering the industry in the mobile and end user compute space, and then spending 15 years as a tech and business architect in identity and directory services, first as a technical director for Charles Schwab and Company in San Francisco, and subsequently as a consulting practice leader. So I've been architecting PAM processes and solutions for about 10 years. And my fun fact is that I started my adult career as a professional classical musician and went into tech for fun in the late 90s in San Francisco. So I got bored and frustrated that Beethoven was not writing any more symphonies, as it turns out. So that's a little bit about me. So the title of our webinar, jumping into it today, is Secure Your Remote Privileged Administrators. So it's always a relevant topic, but truthfully could not be more important than right now. So in this pandemic environment, what may have primarily been change tickets or other types of one-off processes where people worked at home in the evenings, now it's shifted to full-time work for truthfully nearly everyone. So today we're going to talk with Yamana, Rishi, and Rick to really dig into what factors an organization should be looking at in order to decide if this change has or has not inflicted a big change in security posture for you. Okay, team. Let's go around the room a little bit and get an idea of what factors an organization should be looking at to determine their risk posture during this change. So what should a company really be asking themselves about now? So Yamana, what do you think?
Yeah, Zach, the first thing I would be asking myself is like, how often are these administrators knowing and physically typing in the username and password pairs?
Yeah, that's a good one. So that's a good point. Rick, something else they might be thinking about.
If I was them, I'd definitely be asking myself if my authentication methods are sufficient.
Yes, the old authentication. That's a good one. Rishi, what do you think?
Yes, Zach. So I would definitely want to know more about their trusted device technology and endpoint least privilege processes, which is more of an access control and authorization. So the more people shift to home offices and the more likely people are going to increase the risk by wanting to use their personal assets, right? The personal laptop and personal laptop getting connected to the company network. So if their administrators can do their administrative work from untrusted, potentially insecure machines, I believe the risk of breach and impact increases drastically.
That is very true, an excellent point. So transitioning from there, it sounds like a good time to maybe share some data. So a recent survey conducted by CyberArk spanning 3,000 remote office workers and IT professionals was aimed to gauge the current state of security in today's expanded remote environment. And here's some of the figures that they found. So 77% of remote employees are using unmanaged, insecure BYOD devices to access corporate systems. 77%, that's really high. 66% of employees have adopted communication and collaboration tools that have recently reported security vulnerabilities of one kind or another. So wowzas, it's clear that convenience often outweighs security. especially when working, juggling homeschool, childcare, and most of us, I think, can relate to that situation. I know that the people on the phone sure can. So a survey also found, that same survey found that 93% have reused passwords across applications and devices. 29% admitted that they allow other members of their household to use their corporate devices for personal use. I know that a lot of people have had issues getting enough laptops for their kids for school, and that doesn't surprise me at all. 37% insecurely saved passwords in browsers and on their corporate devices. So, Rick, you mentioned authentication as a topic here. What should they be looking at when thinking about authentication right now?
So one thing that enters my mind is, coming at it from a zero trust perspective. The less control I have over an administrator's technology stack, the more important it is that I verify their identity. It's good practice either way, but if you happen to be working from home due to the COVID-19 pandemic, you should beef up your logins with multi-factor authentication if you don't already. At the very least, you should limit admin access if you don't have a sufficient level of assurance that they are who they say they are. That way you don't have to entrust your security to a password alone. Due to bad password hygiene, password reuse, lack of complexity, etc. They're easy to hack, steal, leak, rinse and repeat. Passwords have become and have been the weakest link in the security world. How many companies have help desks that set every initial password to the same? Let me guess what yours might be. COVID-19 summer, exclamation point. Every new user starts out that way. And a lot of times those users actually carry that initial password forward and say, oh, okay, that's kind of the model. If you were already using MFA, the shift to remote work has been less of an impact. But if you haven't been requiring MFA, the risk just went up substantially.
Yeah, that's true, and a really good point that you just brought us back to something that Yamuna mentioned earlier about password security. So, Yamuna, what should an org be looking at regarding password practices, given what the context Rick just set?
Yeah, Zach, so the big question is whether you're using privileged session management, right? So both password checkout and static password exposes you to extra risk during this time. So I'm a firm believer that the more you allow the username and password combination outside the boundaries of your organization, the more likely they are to escape. That is, practices like bash and host, session management, and properly managed trust relationship and other passwordless connection methodologies, it all forces a bad actor to work hard to steal access and reduce the ease of replaying that access elsewhere. Right, so we use this analogy that you can never stop an intended intruder. So as long as you have the defense in depth applied, so you just keep those bad actors, make their life a little harder to get what they want. So the remote work and less all-around control in the current situation means that if your users have to bring those passwords outside your organizations, they're more likely to be compromised. So you really need to focus on this and make it a reality right now. If it is already in place, you're definitely reaping the benefits already.
Great, that's a good point. So if they've already taken care of a lot of that hygiene work, then they're feeling the benefits, and it didn't hurt them as much. So I know that the information security world has been heralding the death of the password for a long time, but for lots of organizations, that's really not a near-term reality. So, but these critical users and accounts, the administrators, seem like the right place to start. So, Rishi, you talked about trusted device and endpoint least privileged. So why should an org be considering their posture with that during this change?
Yeah, absolutely, Zach. So with, as Yamuna said, we talked more about the authentication piece, right? And when it comes to trusted device and endpoint least privilege, it is more about the authorization, and I feel that is very, very critical. It brings multiple aspects into the picture, like reducing the likelihood of your end users being logged on to workstations with admin rights, understanding the security posture of the devices that your administrators are using to perform the remote administration, and preventing your end users from using the corporate assets, such as personal machines for email and web surfing, right? So these aspects, I think, are really critical in reducing the likelihood and impact of the breach. So when this gets combined with your corporate antivirus and endpoint security technologies, I believe the likelihood of keyloggers and other malware drastically decreases. So ideally at this point, you're also using risk-based conditional access and other controls, like the amount of access someone has based on the amount of trust that they're proving to you, right? So the more you can use the adaptive access control to aid in the decreasing operational risk, it is the better approach. So the amount of trust and security that is necessary to access the corporate email should definitely be different than the amount of trust necessary to access the privileged credentials or log on to the system in the privileged context. That's what I feel.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, Rishi. Any other topics, folks, that are mandatory to consider right now?
Yeah, like I would add the BCP and DR process in the mix. So if you don't have an up-to-date BCP DR process and haven't tested them recently, the impact of the problem is going to be much worse. So if your organization has to face another threat like fire or any other natural or like man-made disaster in the middle of this pandemic situation, you need to have successfully tested plan B, right? So 75% of the time I hear from my clients that the DR process is in place, but testing hasn't been done so far. So if you don't test if the process and controls that you have put in place actually work during an emergency situation, then the process that you have put in the paper just gives you a false sense of security.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I'm sure we could spend an hour digging in each of these, and I know that we'll talk more about it when we're assessing risk a little bit later, but I want to switch our lens just a little bit. So now that our administrators and the general population has gone more remote, I wanted to talk about what an org needs to be doing to monitor and protect their environment from the standpoint of users, computers, and accounts. So Rick, what do you think an org should be doing right now to protect the organization from a user access perspective?
From a user access point of view, we need to strictly adopt a least privilege approach for everybody's primary logon account. This is the logon account you use to authenticate to your workstation or laptop, a phone for most of us. And this account is typically linked to your primary email address and messaging system like Teams or Slack or Jabber, what have you. I actually remember the first time I joined a security team and my everyday account was domain admin. Let that sink in for a second. But I tell you what, it was glorious because I could do pretty much anything in Active Directory with the tools loaded on my workstation, create, modify, delete any type of object, and implement group policy at will. I'm sure we will all realize that some time ago that wasn't good practice and have separated privileged accounts or privileged actions to dedicated accounts, ideally without mailboxes at all. That's just to kind of mitigate the whole phishing environment and ease of phishing. Of course, we still need to protect and control those new accounts, which is the primary reason for our call today, because it's even more challenging with the increase in remote work. One other technique I'd like to quickly mention is the concept of just-in-time access, where a user's normal account is given specific permissions for a set amount of time to perform a defined function, typically privileged. This method reduces the need for additional privileged accounts that are permanently privileged and provides some advantages such as simplified attribution. The user performing the task is the one that shows up in the log, and some enhanced control, especially around the time frame. But of course, that's all if it's done properly.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Rick. So we still all of us regularly encounter organizations where primary user accounts have some degree of assigned highly privileged authorizations to them. Domain admins group assigned to primary accounts here and there. If you are in that boat or the situation right now, your risk of privilege compromise likely went up significantly when the workforce went remote. And if you've done the work to get those things decreased, I think you're feeling the benefits. Yamuna, when thinking about monitoring and protecting computers, what should an org be thinking about right now?
So there are a lot of things I recommend organizations do to accomplish defense in depth for their endpoints, especially those of users with privileged access. So first, you should remove admin tools from their user endpoints and use enterprise hard drive encryption solutions and everything for laptops and your workstations. And you should use jump servers and session managements whenever feasible. And it is also very important that you don't use the privilege accounts interactively from your remote machine, and that you avoid direct access from your workstation to servers while working remotely.
Yeah, good points. We've covered some of those in a different context, and we're clearly seeing some themes here. So Rishi, last and not least, if I wanted to specifically monitor and protect accounts, what should I be doing?
Sure, Zach. There are a couple of things that just pop up into my mind. The first and foremost thing is making sure your passwords are changed after each use. So when you talk about a privileged account, and if you are checking out that account at 9 o'clock in the morning, you have a one-time password set up on that account, so it just doesn't stay static for the whole day or for the whole week. And also ensure the exclusivity, right? So if you are using functional accounts, make sure that each functional account is used by only one individual while others cannot. So you build the accountability. So these are some of the compensating controls that come into my mind. And I would also like to join Yamuna and Rick and stress the importance of privilege station management or privilege station monitoring, where you force the users to go through a jump server per se, and then is doing, and also the SSH key management security.
Okay, gotcha. So you went out there just a second at the end there. Were you talking about SSH key management? What did you say at the end, Rishi?
I did, yeah, SSH key management and the security with respect to those SSH keys.
Gotcha. Yeah, those are really good ones. So makes complete sense. So up until now, I think we've been focusing exclusively on the security posture change that's been brought about from this workplace shift in location and the cultural benefits that accompany it. But the landscape really has changed even more than that, hasn't it, Yamuna?
Yeah, sure it is. So in addition to the changes in remote work, the behavior of bad actors has increased as well. So the FBI recently warned of major spike in the cyber attacks.
Oops, that does not sound like a good combination.
No, it's not, because recently during April, the federal agencies issued a public alert noting that the financial institutions and the digital currency exchanges are particularly at risk as attackers develop and launch increasingly sophisticated malware tools in search of large payouts, given that the stimulus checks are all out. But the financial sector isn't the only one at risk. These attackers are also honing in on hospitals, healthcare organizations, research institutions, and the biotechnology companies to gain insights into the coronavirus response, their progressing treatments, and also a viable vaccine.
Gotcha. That's pretty serious. So how are the bad actors going about this then?
So in various ways, right? So, but the privileged access point have become the primary target for these kind of attacks, and the privilege and administrator accounts are the default and hard-coded application backdoors, like Rishi and Rick talked about, the non-interactive users. So, and more. These cyber attackers, they continue to breach these corporate perimeters through these common means, including phishing attacks, malware-infected attachments, social media viruses, and other sophisticated methods as well.
Yeah, that's sad but true. So, Rishi, when Yamuna was just talking about the common means of attack, she described things like phishing. Essentially, this is the oldies but goodies of attack vectors, right? So, why are we still seeing these kind of attacks still on this list?
Yeah, first of all, I would like to agree with Yamuna, and I always believe, and I have always seen that disaster always brings vulnerabilities. Right now, we are in the middle of COVID-19 disaster globally, and then that is making everyone to go remote and work from their offices, and that is bringing so many vulnerabilities that we are discussing right now. And the truth is, while the capabilities of all these attackers are improving, in most of the cases, that those advanced techniques aren't even necessary. They are still having tremendous success with basic attacks. This is why we are emphasizing that housekeeping is so important. I often advise my clients to roll out basic account management and privileged access practices far and wide prior to worrying about most advanced practices. So if you are not managing your privileged and non-privileged identities, you are not even, that's the very basic practice. So attackers know about the implications of remote work and how that might lower the overall security posture. So many organizations that haven't had a chance to implement PAM controls like session management really need to think about and then consider moving this up their priority list. That's what I feel.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I think we've seen a lot of our clients think about moving that up the priority list as well. So why don't we switch over to a slide here and look at some of CyberArk's guidance for approaching this remote problem. Rick, what are we looking at here?
Sure, Zach. So this is guidance on a possible approach to addressing the current problem. Essentially, they're saying first, remove admin rights from workstations and use endpoint least privilege tooling. Rushi's mentioned it, Yamuna's mentioned it. We really need to make sure that those endpoints, the users don't have any more privileges than they need, because those are some of the primary targets and easiest targets. And those are the targets that are, for possibly, the first time, almost permanently located outside your corporate walls. Secondly, harden your remote access security methodology, but think of it holistically. I mean, how are all the different ways people are probably accessing your resources? Are you using, virtual desktops? Are you using, a VPN? Is the VPN always on? Is it a split tunnel, or is it, forcing all traffic through your corporate network? And hopefully you have MFA in front of all that, MFA everywhere. So, make sure you understand all the different ways people are remotely accessing your systems. And then also think outside your walls. Most companies are adopting the cloud in one way or another. So third, get those cloud and software as a service applications under control, and get passwords out of the mix by securing the points of access from your corporate network to those resources. Most of them have the ability to filter where the connections come from for administrative access. Fourth in their list is penetration testing, and ideally this would be external vendor penetration testing. Internal's not bad, but usually those people have a hard time forgetting what they know, and that can be good and bad. They can kind of purposely forget things, purposely ignore things that they know, as well as kind of be able to take advantage of something that maybe an external entity would have a lot harder trouble. So third party, ideally for penetration testing, if you have that ability. And finally, utilize the results from the pen tests and your other analysis to kind of create a risk-based phased approach to implementing additional PAM controls from there. And I think this is a good general approach if all things are equal.
So that makes complete sense. But there's the real question, isn't it, Rick? So what is the likelihood that all things are equal?
Truthfully, we see a lot of themes that are common to clients, but in the large enterprises where we do most of our work, they really are unique. So this could be good advice either way, but if an organization is going to work on the most urgent items for them and to make the largest impact that is feasible with their resources, they really need to analyze their specific security posture as it relates to the access pattern and methodologies in their own organization.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that better myself, Yamuna. So quick time check here. So what do you guys say we move on to the access patterns discussion? Does that work for you guys, or anything else to add before we do that?
Sounds good.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah, sounds good, Zach.
All right. Okay, cool. So In this section of the conversation, we're going to do our best to get down to the brass tacks of approaches and methodologies that can really help you to assess the general security posture and risk that's associated with the way you're already using privileged access in your enterprise in order to find the right things to work on and to properly prioritize those things and of course justify them as necessary. So that, as the name of the webinar implies, we're taking a particular focus on the security posture of your org now that your workforce has likely predominantly gone remote. But that means that you would run the process we're talking about twice to see the difference between those two things. Once considering the workforce as it's primarily on site, and again with the answers reflecting what that change has been now that they're nearly fully remote. But this process really should be useful under any circumstances. And also, since we're talking about risk, security posture, and risk measurement here and within your own organization, let us for sure say that if you have a very strong technology risk management organization in your company, we really recommend that you partner with them for the best ways to measure risk right at home in your org. Or partner with risk management consultancy such as our awesome GRC colleagues at Edgile to help you through assessing your own risk. So this is intended to be to help you decide what to work on, justify those things, and quantify them for what's going on. It's not intended to be a full risk management analysis. So before we get to that, so we've made the grand assumption in the premise of this webinar topic that your workforce, including administrators, has likely gone, that it's changed your security posture. But Rishi, with all the talk of the perimeter having gone away and that identity is the new perimeter, do you think that location really should even be a factor in this equation right now?
Of course, Zach, because you can't count on the network perimeter and firewall as high level of protection as the assumptions that we made back in like 15 years ago. But it doesn't mean that they aren't valuable. And believe me, none of my clients I have worked with have any plans to turn off their firewalls or open the doors to the public internet anytime soon. Don't get me wrong there. But that's one of the important reasons that we get so vocal about trying to keep privileged usernames and passwords from being used outside the organizations, right? You heard the stats at the beginning of this session about people's behavior at home. Of course, we would prefer that administrators didn't know them or have to use them in the first place. But in this pandemic situation, to keep the lights on, to do the administration, to do the maintenance, bringing those passwords into a less protected environment is risky business. Unless the organization has really done a good job of implementing a defense in depth protections or some PAM program or understanding of how these identities are used and then monitor privileged identities, that is.
Yeah, thanks for the context. Also a good point. If you've already taken the time to implement solid processes across each layer of that defense in depth strategy, it's possible you're now seeing increased benefits from that investment as compared to your competitors. If that is you and your organization, congratulations, because it's these types of times that you're prepared for. So let's dig into the access patterns topic. So I think that this is a big reason why folks are here today. So Yamuna, can you describe for us, for the purposes of this particular discussion, what an access pattern is and the types of access patterns that we're going to be talking about?
Sure, Zach. So we use the term access pattern to describe a grouping of ID type, access method, protocol, target system, and other factors that are used to perform some work. So in this case, we are going to keep our patterns on a pretty high level. That being said, the privileged access is critical. If they haven't already, we recommend that every organization take the time to do detailed privileged access discovery so that they understand exactly like how people are using privilege at their company, and so that they can take the time to drive users to use sufficient controlled access pattern. So they say, Zach, with great power comes great responsibility. So to be very responsible and very cautious in dealing with the privileged access.
Yeah, makes complete sense. And I think that, with these types of practices, companies realize that they can really usher people into using the methods that they want them to use if they want to. So excellent. So what are some of the examples of patterns in this particular case, Yamuna?
Yeah, so today we are going to talk about some typical high-level access pattern. We'll then talk about like how we measure the risk associated to an access pattern, and then we'll dig more into one example in detail. So here we have a list of basic access patterns for using Active Directory admin accounts. The first four patterns are pretty much in maturity order. The last two are more unique. So we have the full-time admin access assigned to primary mail enable ID. Rick already mentioned like how common this was, and when he first started as a sysadmin. Before I move on to the others, I can tell you that if you have like a full-time domain admin access assigned to people's primary AD accounts in the year 2020, you've got some work to do, and you have got to do it quickly. And the other patterns are full-time access to admin ID, the password checkout from CyberArk solution, the session management, again, from CyberArk, and just-in-time authorization added to your primary mail-enabled ID, and then the zero trust third-party contractor privilege access tooling flows in Aliro. Yep.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense. So now we have some patterns that we want to evaluate. So Rick, can you walk us through a way that we can begin to evaluate how much risk we're likely exposing ourselves to given a particular access pattern?
Sure, Zach. So many of you may have seen something like this before. It's a basic risk management 5x5 matrix. Like Zach said earlier, if your org really needs or already has processes and standards in place for evaluating risk, you'll really want to align with those. Some of those processes will even have dollar amounts assigned to particular impacts. That can help you with both better understanding the potential business impact of an event, as well as prioritizing budget for various security initiatives. If you look on the left side of the matrix, you'll see that it is measuring the likelihood of a security event. And on the bottom, we see we are measuring the impact of said event. Everything we're going to talk about in this section is about trying to understand the likelihood of an event occurring and the impact of the event if it actually comes to fruition. You can see that the highest risk items are those that end up on the top right of the matrix labeled as critical. These are bad news. In our case, these would be breaches almost certain to happen and where the impact would be significant. Scary stuff.
Yeah, that makes complete sense and very useful. So Rishi, this sounds really easy, right? You just take an access path and assign it a score. What's so difficult about that?
I wish it was really that easy, Zach. I really wish. Actually, there are a lot of factors that you need to understand prior to you assigning any given access path a score for the likelihood and impact. Do you mind switching to the kill chain slide, please?
Excellent.
Perfect, thanks. Yeah, so many of you may be familiar with this cyber kill chain. There are many versions of these floating out there. So what you are essentially looking at is the visualization from the CyberArk. The idea is that these are all of the steps that a bad actor has to go through to achieve their ultimate goal, like to gain privileged access or to cause damage, right? So the concept holds that if you break the chain at any point before it ends, then you have prevented the attack. So essentially, an attacker has to land, as you see in that first bubble right there on the left, labeled initial infection. Yeah, right there. And then you work their way through the series of lateral movements and privilege escalation until they get to what they are intended on to the far right. So typically either disruption or damage, such as stealing data or causing an outage right in the middle of this pandemic.
Yeah, that makes sense, Rishi. And so I'll add that since this is a CyberArk slide, they've also added some circles that represent the links in the chain that represent the highest risk and expected IT spend for those categories, represented as a percentage of the overall security spend. So if we can turn to the next slide here real quick. If you are part of an organization's PAM team, your assigned responsibilities sit right in the middle of this chain, if you saw where some of those circles were. So as a result, you end up sitting, by our perspective, this is definitely our perspective, right in the middle between likelihood and impact, right? Right during that cycle that they were talking about privileged escalation. So I've come up with this quick diagram to help illustrate this. So from the vantage point of where we're sitting with the PAM team or the PAM tooling or privileged credentials in general, when you look to your left, that's where the likelihood of a breach taking place is really happening, right? The attacker landing and beginning the cycle of lateral movement, trying to get their hands on enough privileged access to accomplish their goal. So you're the team managing those security credentials and securing those credentials. So to the right, when you turn to the right, you have the actual target, right? Critical information or availability. And typically speaking, in most configurations, they cannot get from where they're landing to where they need to go without coming through you, right? So we use the phrase at the top near the slide a lot. We really do believe that privileged access management is all of information security through the lens of administrative access. And by that, we're definitely not trying to say that your PAM team now owns every process and technology in the cyber kill chain. Definitely not saying that. We're trying to say that your PAM practitioners should be the experts on how administrative access is used, and that they should use that knowledge to make a positive impact on security as widely as is feasible. So a quick analogy in this particular space that's meaningful for me. So I was a longtime soccer goalie, and on first glance, just like the PAM team here, the job description appears to be stop the opposing attackers from shooting the ball past you once they get near the goal, right? That's pretty logical, and it's definitely true. But what any goalkeeper worth their salt quickly realizes is that their chances of a successful defense are infinitely better if the attacker never gets near the goal, right? So when they have the right their teammates assisting with the defense, when they get there, the goalie has a very unique vantage point on the field, and you can help your teammates thwart attacks through communications, processes, all the way up the field. So essentially, this is a long way of saying that the best PAM teams are loudmouths that look up and down the chain, trying to protect privileged access from being compromised by all means necessary, right? So annoying their teammates and their adversaries alike. So both through the items that they own, and this is super important, through the influence that you can muster. So just because, if you're PAM folks on this team, just because you have a particular set of responsibilities, you really should think about what your influence and span of influence is. So at any point, let's dig into a little bit more into the access pattern that we're going to assess. So Yamuna, which of these patterns are we going to look at and why?
Yeah, sure, Zach. Yeah, perfect analogy, by the way. Yeah, so we are going to look at the pattern where an admin checks out their secondary admin ID from a PAM tool. We choose this pattern because it's pretty middle of the road, right? The organization is using PAM tool, which is great. But during the window where the password is checked out, the tool has no control or visibility into what is happening with the ID. So for the likelihood of this admin ID being compromised, we are going to look upstream to all of the securities in place from the time the attacker lands in the organization all the way up until they have compromised the credential. For the impact, we are going to be looking at what authorization that ID has, so that we can determine like what applications, data, or administrative functions that attacker can accomplish with ID.
Gotcha. Makes sense. So we could spend a ton of time on this exercise, and you should be very, very thoughtful and deliberate when you do it in your organization with as much tribal and documented knowledge as you can. But Rishi, can you quickly walk us through the likelihood portion of this example?
Yeah, sure. So here are some of the questions I always ask my customers to establish the likelihood. How much control do you have over the administrator's devices and environment, right? Like Yamuna said, once these credentials are checked out, we just have controlled the authentication. Say those are going to get changed within 2 hours, but what's going to happen within those 2 hours is out of your hands. How much control do you have over the privileged access? Are you forcing them to go through a jump server where you are monitoring what they are doing with their privileged credentials? What is the authentication level of assurance to CyberArk? Are you doing a two-factor authentication, or someone just using their AD credentials, which can be social attacked and can get hold of, and how long you can have this admin account checked out based on their access pattern. So based on all these questions, you will notice that there are all these controls in place for managing the authentication, but the upstream protection, such as the endpoint least privilege or access control or authorization, what that privileged account can do, aren't in place. And password is uncontrolled for the duration that it is checked out. So that is a very important consideration that we need to consider, Zach, about the likelihood of this attack.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so that you have an understanding of this particular example, we're giving rationale in a particular situation and assigning the low, medium, high, and low assessments to it, meaning you can see our rationale here that in this particular organization, the reason why we gave it low over the control of administrative devices is because the rationale is that all admins are full-time remote, low maturity for trusted devices, and they have admin access to their own workstation. So you can look at these rationales as we're going through, but know that we're doing example answers here that make sense to us. And clearly we can dig into these details really deeply, but let's move on. Rick, can you quickly talk us through the impact in this scenario?
Yeah, sure, Zach. And I think for impact, you need to think about the malicious person or group and what their motives are, at least to begin with. Is it more likely to be like a disruption of service, or is it more likely to be exfiltration of data? Kind of a couple things that Rushi mentioned earlier. But a couple questions we're asking are, how much access does the credential that's been compromised have to Active Directory itself? If they have the ability to create objects, they could create all sorts of havoc, create and delete objects within your Active Directory, because that is the core of most companies' environments these days. Everything hinges on Active Directory. All access is controlled, at least by groups, by groupings, by Active Directory. And then how much access does that credential have to critical applications and the infrastructure underneath that runs them? In this example, you can see that it didn't fare very well.
Yeah, it didn't, and you can see the rationale of why in this particular case we came up with these scenarios. So if you have the likelihood and a credential ends up getting compromised in this particular situation, they can do an awful lot of damage looking right to the impact on that scale.
Yeah, and we can see that the likelihood of this compromise happening is a medium, listed here on the chart as, quote, possible. And the impact is high, listed here on the chart as significant. Based on the understanding of people working their way through this exercise, that puts the risk on this particular access pattern as high. This does not represent a strong security posture on a whole. Unless there are more critical items to deal with at the company, something needs to improve here. Ideally, the security architects responsible for the various control points along the chain can collaborate to decide on the best place in the process to implement controls, ultimately choosing the solutions that can be rolled out easiest and have the biggest security impact. Ideally, they'll be considering the principles of zero trust along the way as well.
Yeah, great point, Rick, and good holistic perspective too, to show that the PAM tool doesn't always have to be the exact solution that handles this, as long as you can find the right place to break that chain. So, there are many things we can dig into and unpack here, and so many parts of the puzzle that we haven't touched on. So, what are some of the topics that we haven't hit at all that contribute to the security of these access patterns and to the security posture of the organization as a whole now that the workforce has moved remote?
So I would have to say the state of the PAM program of the company.
Yeah, PAM program is important. It's certainly not a point solution, but a program. That's a good one. Anyone else?
Sure. So security analytics, which is getting a lot of popularity these days, right? Like machine learning, artificial intelligence.
Sure, Zach. Zach, I'd also say, compliance obligations. How many companies have taken a step back and kind of looked at how these changes that we've undergone have impacted our compliance with, with regulations, with laws. At the same time, remembering, compliance does not equal security.
Yeah, good point. But it could be substantial risk. What are you saying there, Rishi?
I agree. Yes.
Okay, awesome. So these are good ones. So if you or your team is getting stuck on any of these conversations, we'd be very interested to learn more about your circumstances and see if there's a way for us to help out. Before we conclude, I was hoping that I can ask Rishi to give us a quick overview on CyberArk's new Alero product and how it's addressing many of the problems associated with non-employee or even remote employee privileged administration, because it's a pretty unique approach that we're seeing in the industry right now. Rishi, do you mind giving us a show?
Absolutely not. Can we move on to the slide for the special consideration for non-employee admins? Perfect, thank you. So as here you can see some of the problems associated with non-employee or contractors or external vendors who have admin access. That includes consultants like us, right? That are regularly coming into the organization to strategize and then accomplish the critical security projects. So there are a lot of issues with these external identities as compared to the internal identities, right? Or contractor versus employees. Many of the clients have concerns that when it comes to the external entities accessing their environment, how to provision them. Some of their concerns are the level of trust is typically less than an employee. Onboarding process can be too lengthy. So for a project of 2 weeks, if it's going to take 3 weeks to onboard by account, what am I gonna there to accomplish, right? So we cannot start the project on time. So these painful processes lead to unhealthy workarounds, even when just trying to get their work done. So to address all of these, CyberArk Alero addresses these problems quite elegantly. And then it's very quick when it comes to provisioning, deprovisioning. It quickly grants and revokes privileges, and it utilizes absolutely zero trust model. So you don't need a primary Active Directory account, or you don't need any sort of account into the customer environment in order to get a privileged access to their enterprise. It is VPN-less, it is password-less, it is agent-less, and utilizes your already implemented CyberArk privilege station management infrastructure to keep the control of the overall end-to-end process, right from the logging in and accessing something within your organization. Can we move to the next slide, please, Zach?
Sure.
Yeah, so as you can see, and it's a quite a simplified diagram. As you can see here, you create the account for your contractor and grant access directly in Alero. Or if Alero is not in place, ideally you can use IGA tools like SailPoint or IIQ to create the account. This also uses biometrics. So the contractor uses an app on their smartphone for the passwordless authentication. So you basically use your Face ID to log into the app, and then you scan a QR code and you actually get into the PVWA or their main CyberArk web interface, and it will directly let you into the CyberArk. In the CyberArk, the contractor is limited to exactly what you need them to access based on their roles and responsibilities. And all of this access, as you can see, is controlled through HTML5 gateway. So with Alero, there is not a concept of I'm logging in and checking out a credential. You have to go through PSM or a privilege station manager. So it's a very end-to-end privileged access management system for the external vendors and contractors.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And truthfully, this is super cool for those of us that have been in the industry for a while. It's super refreshing to see things going the direction of lightweight, fit for purpose solutions that can be deployed quickly as well. I think of many consulting projects where we get onboarded, and it takes a long time for our teams to get onboarded, where we would have benefited from a solution like this.
Yeah, especially during this COVID situation, Zach. I totally agree.
Yeah, it makes sense. So we have much more to share and talk about, but alas, we need to save those for our next webinar, of which there will be more. I want to thank our esteemed architects. So Yamana, Rick, and Rishi, thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise with us today. Also wanted to thank everyone attending live, and for those of you that are listening in replay after the fact. So in addition to hopefully being able to be a useful topic for you, we hope that it gives you an idea of the type of privileged access talent that we do have here at Agile. So and of which this is just a selection. So if you're interested or in need of a consultation, or just want to have a meaningful conversation about this or something else, please do reach out. So there's contact information for me here on the slide, as well as for the Agile information line. And we'll be following up with any questions or topics that are delivered via chat during this session as well. So also a quick plug for our upcoming webinars. You can see here at the link that agile.com/webinars. You should be able to go there and find out all of the webinars that are coming up. We've really had a big increase in our webinar content as of recently, and they've been really well received. So you can also look in there for webinars that have already happened and choose some good replays for yourself. So with that, and hope to see you next time.